Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. This is a series of videos designed to help anyone take their first steps into Eurorack modular synthesis. In this episode, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of choosing a case and a power supply for our Eurorack system. And I'm going to introduce you to Modular Grid, which is probably the most useful modular resource on the internet. So undoubtedly, choosing a case is the first barrier we hit when trying to get into modular synthesis. We want to buy modules to build our synthesizer, and so we need a case to put them in, and a power supply to make them all light up and make noises. Historically, this has been all sort of a bit DIY, meaning that not only do you need to be an electrical engineer to understand the modules, you've also got to be a cabinet maker in order to build the surrounding enclosure. You probably couldn't ask for a more extraordinary hobby than building your own synthesizer. Can I call it a hobby? Well, anyway, I mean, building the entire case and then building the modules and wiring the whole thing together, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing to do with your Sunday afternoons. But hopefully what I'm trying to show in my journey, and I'm certainly no cabinet maker, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It can, if you want to get all into the planing stuff and wiring stuff together. That's completely fine. That's awesome. Go and do that thing. But I think for perhaps many of us, that's a step in too far. We actually want to get on with the music making part and all of that, rather than putting all our energy into making the case. And these days, that is thankfully completely possible. There's quite a wide range of off-the-shelf options available now, so you don't have to do it yourself, unless of course you want to. So if you're not having to worry about building one, then really the problem becomes which one do we get? What size? What shape? How many rows? How much power do I need for all the modules I'm going to run? Well, that's what we're going to look at. So what are these cases about? Well, I'm talking about Eurorack here. There are other forms of modular that are in different sizes, and if you check out the website, you'll find an article I wrote all about the different formats of modular. But this is Eurorack, and Eurorack was designed by a company called Dofa, who produced modules and sort of kicked off the whole Eurorack thing about a decade ago. I'm going to use my little Roland de Moore here. This is my first accidental Eurorack module. Accidental because I didn't really mean to buy it, but I knew that I wanted one for lots of different reasons than actually being a module. But it's the only one I currently have. So this is the size and shape of a Eurorack module. It is 3U high. Now, that refers to the Pro Audio standard of rack gear that you would find in a studio. And this is 3U. You get 1U rack units, 2U rack units, etc. This is 3U high. That is the format that Dofa decided to use. And then the width is measured in what's called horizontal pitch, or sometimes hole point. And Dofa decided that 5 HP are going to fit in 1 inch. So in your 19-inch rack that you'd normally have in Pro Audio, you're going to get 95 HP. I mean, typically modules are 4 HP wide. That's about wide enough for you to get a knob on there and a couple of switches, but they can also be much bigger. They can be 8, 16, 24. They don't have to be multiples of 2. My Mother 32, for instance, is 60 HP wide. But all of that is simply the standard that Dofa decided upon when they put the whole thing together. So taking the Pro Audio 19-inch rack standard then, your Eurorack could simply be 2 rails spaced 3U apart on a 19-inch rack unit. But that sort of format seemed to get discarded quite quickly. I mean, I guess it's not very big. It's about 95 HP, 19 inches, which is about that big, a little bit bigger than my Mother 32. So it's not a massive amount to play with, and so more commonly we find cases in size of 104 HP or 120 HP, and then you have those in 3U rows. You might have a 3U case, a 6U case, a 12U case, etc, etc. Sometimes they're built into boxes, sometimes they're built into these little skiffs, sometimes huge cabinets and arrays that go crawling up your wall, or in sort of openable flight cases made for travelling. You can easily shell out over £500 for a decent sized case. If you want something custom built and huge, then it can run into thousands of pounds. And this is just the case. You haven't put any modules in yet. It's not going to make a sound. So you can see why some people might resort to making them out of cardboard or repurposing IKEA drawers. That seems to be a popular one. But there are a number of more pocket-friendly options out there that are slightly more modest in size, and they are perhaps a better way to start with this rather than some great big 12U behemoth. Although one piece of advice to bear in mind, which you will hear a lot, is that you will always need a bigger case. So looking at cases then, there are some extraordinary things available in proper sort of studio quality, professional, cabinet-made Eurorack cases, like what we see here on synths.com. The prices initially seem pretty reasonable. They're all sort of around £300, but that's without anything and for the smallest possible version. So once you've had a power supply or made it up to the size that you want to use, it's going to be £500, £600, £700 plus. And if you look at something like this 12U walnut Eurorack here, once you've added, say we're going to call it 126 HP, going to add a power supply, it's already over £1,000. I mean, it will look flipping awesome. I mean, look at that. That's just going to be amazing. But you're going to pay, you know, top dollar for that. And that's fine. That's good if that's what you're wanting to do. However, what I'm sort of dealing with and trying to suggest here is a smaller, more modest, either a single row, perhaps a double row or something. And I just wanted to show you the options that are available in that sort of world. First of all, there's something called a lunchbox, which is kind of literally the idea of having like a lunchbox that you open up and take your sandwiches out of, which is kind of a bit of a briefcase size into which you can stuff a bit of modular. I mean, one of the original videos that inspired me into this whole Eurorack business was one of the modular on the roof videos. And in the first one of those I saw, he had just a simple single voice within this little case, then running with an external sequencer. And the sounds that he could make with just that, which is probably only 54 HP, something of that sort of size, seemed to be awesome. I mean, they're small, they're neat, they're portable, but they're probably not your entire system. They're probably used most commonly by people who are taking part of their system out to do a gig or to perform with, or they're using several of these together and it's just a convenient way of packaging them. So for me, it's just not quite big enough. Next up in the sort of sensible range of cases are the ones from TopTop. They make their own cases. There's some which are 19-inch rack mountable cases. They have these suitcase versions, which you see around quite a lot. They're quite a popular case in this boxy shape, 2 rows, 3 rows. They also do these much, much larger ones. And then they come down to some very, very basic ones, you know, simple, something made out of plywood or raw wood, untreated wood with some rails and a power supply built in. I mean, they look a bit basic, but you can certainly tart them up. I mean, Red Dog did a little article on how to make your Dofer basic case into something more interesting, and that looks pretty good, I think. So the Dofer A100 case, like we've got here, is 2 rows of 84 HP, and that with the suitable power supply comes in at just under £300. Now the other option is what you would call a Skiff, which is a single 3U row of something, usually about 104 HP, with a power supply into which you can put all your modules in this single row, like this one here from Make Noise. Like so, comes with a power supply built in. Normally power comes out the side and you can fill that with your modules. That sort of case with power is around 240, 250 quid, which is another really good option. One thing to note is that they tend to be a little bit shallow, and some modules require a huge amount of depth for no suitably explored reason. So you just have to be aware that perhaps some of the deeper modules are not going to fit in your quite sort of shallow desktop Skiff. At least that's what I hear, that's what people tell me. And then the most cost-effective of all is the TipTop Audio Happy Ending Kit. It's a great name for it. It's just a 19-inch rack unit with 2 rails. It doesn't have a back on it or anything like that. It's designed to sit in an existing 19-inch U Pro Audio rack. And it comes with the uZeus TipTop power supply. It is definitely the most cost-effective way to get yourself buying modules. So while we're with TipTop Audio, the other thing they do is this new Mantis case. Now this is pretty innovative. It's a plastic molded case which has 2 rows of 104 HP, complete with power supply, all integrated, and it can sit up in various different orientations, so console or tipped up a bit or completely upright. Now I think, or at least I hope, we're going to see more of this sort of thing where the sort of traditional wooden sided cases, they're brilliant, they're all very well, but there's plenty of room for sort of innovation in this market in producing a decent, cost-effective way of mounting all your modules, maybe making it more portable, maybe making it more robust. The one thing this doesn't have, and seems to be perhaps a little bit of a misstep, is there's no kind of cover. I'd quite like there to be some kind of plastic cover that goes over the top so it could be easily transportable. And although it's not cheap at about £400, it's a pretty decent all-in-one solution. So what have I decided to do? Well, this is the space that I've cleared for my Eurorack, and as you know, I have the Mother 32 as essentially my starting point. Now Moog do a couple of their own cases, a couple of little Skiff cases. One of them is designed to match the Mother 32 and to sit up here in 2 tiers, and then a 3rd tier, and that sort of creates this sort of lovely angular curve of Moog lovely modularness. And that was absolutely what I was going to go for straight away. It seemed to be the perfect fit. However, the more and more I looked into it, the more this idea of needing a bigger case kept creeping up. And then looking at the physicality of this, every time I looked at it and used it, it became abundantly clear that there's not a lot of space here. I mean, sure, you could fit in maybe half a dozen modules, but some of them are big. I mean, look at this fella. This is going to take quite a chunk of that 60U, and it's just a delay line. There's lots of modules which are very interested in me, like maths and clouds, and both of those, well, it would just fit those two and a couple of bits. That would be it. So very quickly, it just seemed to me that a 60 HP unit here, even going up to the 120, is just not really the right size. And also, I wasn't entirely sure that it felt right. It seemed to look too small. I saw pictures of it and people using it. It just seemed a bit weeny. However, I really liked the angle and the look of the Moog cases. I liked the way that you could add to it and you had this 2-tier or 3-tier system. That was excellent. I really liked the way that I could build a single Skiff with a load of stuff and then add another one at a later date, which is inevitably going to happen. But I didn't have to invest in a big case which would sit there empty for a good long time. So I discovered that Moog do a longer case. They do a 104 HP case. Now that was a bit more like it, but that left me with a dilemma because this is 60 HP. If I was to drop this into a 104 HP case, it would only leave me with 44 HP left, which is less than having the 60 HP one up here. So what am I thinking? Well, what I thought is that because this is functioning quite perfectly on its own, standalone, outside of a Eurorack box, then I don't actually need to put it in it, if that makes sense. So instead, I could get a 104 HP box, not put the Mother 32 in it, have it running alongside. In fact, I could, if I'm clever, have it angled up on top or beneath the new Moog case to sort of hack it into a bit of a single device. But ultimately what it would give me would be a single 104 HP case that I could fill with the modules of my choice. And then perhaps I can add another 104 HP one later on once I've filled it up with modules. Now that seemed to me to be some kind of sensible option. I mean, you've got to find an option in there somewhere, and I flip and flop around on this. I mean, there's the cases by Dofa, the sort of the square box ones. I mean, they're quite sort of rock and roll because you spray paint them and stick stickers on it, and they're really sort of edgy, and they're this big wall of modular, and there's something really kind of cool and indie about that. But then I'm loving the angle of the Moog, and of course the wooden size, and the fact it's got flipping Moog written on the back. You know, you have to use something which is going to push you into making that decision. And for me, overall, the modular nature, obviously, having been able to stack up different rows of these very easily with the Moog system, that really appeals. So that seems to be the decision. I mean, and in the space, I'll find my tape measure, 104 HP is about 21 inches, which is this big. So it's actually surprisingly small. You know, it goes to here. In fact, if I put my Zero Coast and the Moog together, that is just over 104 HP. So it's still not as big as you'd think. It's still quite petite. I still think I'm going to fill it up quite quickly. But we'll see. That's going to be my starting point. So that's what I've ordered. I'm hoping to see it turn up in a few days. And then we can really get started with filling it with full of stuff. So that sounds like a plan. And if you come up with a plan, just go with it. Don't think about it. Just go and do it. Otherwise, you'll stay here procrastinating about it forever. Right, so let's just check the pricing, because that starts to become important. My aim was to get a case solution of under £300. That to me seemed like a reasonable amount to pay for a case and power supply to run on my modules. Anything more than that seemed overly posh for the shabbiness of my shared studio. So the 104 HP Moog case comes in at about £109. For that, you do not get a power supply. The power supply is extra. Now, the uZeus power supply is about £79. And then I wanted the 2-tier rack ears, if you like, which allow me to affix it to my Mother 32 and sit above it. Those were £45. And then I'd need a wall wart to actually power the thing. So that's probably another, I don't know, £8. Leave me with a total of something around 250 quid. That's not too bad. That's not too shabby at all. Right, so that brings us into power supplies. Now these are a right pain in the arse. The reason being is that there's an awful lot of talk about it, but it's very difficult to mine and extract the right sort of information to make an actual purchase. I mean, wherever you go and hang out with other Eurorack modular people on forums or Facebook groups, they will all talk about the need for a beefier power supply. In all my sort of searching and trawling through all this information, very few people actually refer to a product that you can buy. There's lots of talk about voltages and ampage and wattage and transformers and bus boards and all this stuff, and it's really good. And if you want to get down into the detail, then absolutely take a visit to Muff Wiggler forum. And yeah, that's a terrible name, but it is a real place. It's the best Eurorack or modular forum on the internet, Muff Wiggler. I imagine you have to spell it correctly. And you will find incredibly detailed information about power supplies and how to put it together and how to make it all work and what you need and what the requirements are. And again, we find ourselves into this world of the electrical engineer. I mean, do we actually have to hand wind our own transformers? No, I don't think we do. I think you can. I don't think we have to, or at least not anymore. Now, a Eurorack power supply is made up of 3 parts. You have the bus board, which is what the modules plug themselves into. You have the transformer, which puts out the correct voltages, and you have the power supply, which plugs in to the wall, which is normally a laptop style power supply. Now, which part of this has to be beefy is not entirely clear, but the rule of thumb is that in order to have a happy system, the amount of current that your modules draw must not exceed the amount of current that's available from your power supply. So that's simple, yeah? Well, kind of, but how the heck are you supposed to know what that is exactly? I mean, a lot of the advice is based upon adding up the current draw of all your modules and then making a decision on your power supply. However, if you're at the beginning of this journey like I am, I'm only going to be buying a couple of modules and I want to buy a case. I do not yet know what modules are going to be featuring in this case, and so I can't actually add up the current draw on them all because I don't know what they are. And so can I buy a case without knowing that, or can I buy a power supply without knowing that, or should I buy a power supply which is far too big just in case I get something which has an enormous amount of draw? I don't know, you end up in this kind of circle where you're not getting anywhere. And do we really need to be worried about this if you are buying a case from a shop? I mean, surely you would like to think that if you buy a Eurorack case from a shop, they are going to supply you with an appropriate power supply. You would have thought that, wouldn't you? That seems like a relatively safe bet. So what I'm suggesting is that perhaps it's only really in the realms of deep DIY that you need to get too worried about the power supply. More often than not, the case you're going to buy off the shelf will have a power supply that comes with it, which will be appropriate to the job. Now, it just so happens that the case that I'm buying, the Moog case, doesn't come with a power supply. Fabulous. So I'm having to buy one off the shelf. So, boiling it all down, as I have done now, to the reality of what's actually happening in the world on the street. And that is that there's essentially 2 power supplies available for you to buy. If you go to any modular shop or any music shop which is selling modular gear, there will be a choice of 2. And so very quickly you realise that all the talk and discussion about power supplies, in the instance that you're buying a relatively modest case that you need to power, it's all kind of irrelevant because you can only choose one of these, and because a shop is selling it to you that's doing modular stuff, again, we're just going to have to assume that it's going to work. And that's great. So your choices are, there's the uZeus from TipTop Audio. This seems to be the one pretty much that everybody uses if you've got a single row Skiff. The alternative one is from 4MS. Now they do 2 versions, a 30 watt and a 40 watt. The 30 watt version is essentially like the uZeus. The 40 watt is the beefier option, I've decided to call it, because it can run sort of 2 rows. It could run over 200 HP, so 2 rows of 104 HP. Whereas the uZeus and the 4MS 30 are better suited to running a single row of 104 HP, or a little bit more. And both these power supplies come with the flying bus loose cable ribbon thing. The TipTop one is the cheapest at about 80 quid. The 4MS one is a bit more pricey at 150. And if in doubt, then talk to a specialist. Modular grid, then. This is one of the most important and useful modular resources on the internet. It's modulargrid.net, and it's completely fabulous. You can lose yourself in here for hours. It covers all types of modular, all formats, but of course we're interested in Eurorack. So the idea is very simple. You choose your case and you build your synth. You put in modules, whatever modules you want, and stick them into the case of your choice. So we can create a new rack, go 2 rows of 104 HP, Eurorack format, and select the sort of case. Let's go for a Dofa style case and hit save. So here's my lovely empty case. Now where are the modules? Well, the modules are all down here. Every single one. You will find every module ever made, I think, down here in this list. Now what you can do is you can narrow this down a little bit by choosing something by name or by type or by function or by manufacturer. So if I go for an oscillator, choose oscillator, then down here I've got a list of oscillators. So let's stick a tone star in my rack. I might quite fancy the Soulsby, that looks really nice. And I'll stick in a Dreadbox one. I'll go back up to the top, and then there they are, and I can move them around, arrange them where I want them to be within my rack. Now obviously oscillators is not what it's all about. I might also need an envelope generator. Let's have a search for some of those. There we go, a Lifeforms one, stick that in. How about a filter? Fusion filter, always. And they're all filling the space at the top. Now, that's great, and you can rearrange these. I mean, they obviously don't make any sound, but you can decide where you want to put them, arrange how you want it to look, and it gives you a great idea of what will actually fit in your case. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that you cannot get anywhere near as much in your case as you thought you could. But probably the most important thing is down here. It lists the power consumption. It totals up all of the power of all of the modules within the case that you're building, and it gives you the overall power consumption. And if you are building your own case, and if you are sourcing your own power supply, then that information is going to be vital. The other thing it does is it shows you the approximate price of all these modules. Now that is flipping alarming, so it's probably best not to look at that bit and concentrate on how lovely it is to be able to put your modules around the place. So just as an example, I'll show you my efforts. This was the first thing that I put together when I was first thinking about it. Look, it's a nice 3 rows of 104 HP. I've got the clouds in there, this glorious Erica synths Fusion VCO, filters here, the chord, some Studio Electronic stuff, some Dreadbox stuff, really interesting things, some make noise bits and pieces, and maths of course. And you think to yourself, well, that's lovely. And then look at the price, it's $5,500. So yeah, quite frightening. So from there, I then looked at doing the Mother 32 thing. So here is my Mother 32 with the 60U above it. And as you can see, there's just no room for anything. I mean, I managed to get a Pico VCO in over there, a filter, musical instruments ripples, this thing here that I can't remember what that is, and a sequencer thing and a randomizer. So there's a few bits and pieces in there, but there's really just not enough to make it worthwhile. You're always going to be looking to put more in there, and you're going to break it, and you have to be looking straight away for another case. So I decided against this route purely because I think I would outgrow it too quickly. So I had to push myself to something slightly larger. And this is what I'm working on at the moment. This is my 104 HP Moog case, I suppose, and I'm very slowly going through and trying out different things, not to see what the power consumption is. The power consumption is going to be fine because the TipTop power supply in there is going to deal with whatever modules I put in here. But rather what I'm trying to do is come up with the right combination of the first handful of modules. Things that are going to complement the Mother 32 well, things that are going to add interest and modulation, and are going to be fun to play with, that's going to take me beyond what the Mother 32 can do. But I haven't got there yet. I'm still messing about and changing things around, and that's the beauty of modular grid, is that you can sit here, you can play, you can dream, you can drop different things in and rearrange them and see how it looks, as well as what the costs are going to be, what the power consumption is going to be, and whether you've got everything that you need within your rack. So there you are. I hope that's been useful. Get yourself a case. Don't worry about the power supply, because it's going to be there and it's going to be working and it will be adequate, unless you're doing something huge and something crazy. And with our choice of case out of the way, we can now start to focus on the actual modules. So what modules am I going to get first? Now that's going to be the focus of my next video, which will be coming very soon. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.